Hi everyone, and welcome to And So On. My name is Lisa, and today I'm going to answer the question, is it worth hand quilting on your garments? Okay, so quilting on your garments has become pretty popular over the last couple of years in the sewing community, and it kind of makes sense because often quilters are garment sewers and garment sewers are quilters. In fact, I used to quilt quite a bit. That's kind of how I got into sewing quite a bit, and I used to do a lot of hand sewing or hand quilting because I never really got the hang of machine sewing, and I never really enjoyed that portion of it. And so since I never really did big projects, big quilts, I tended to just do lap quilts or baby quilts or something like that. I often did them by hand. And my grandmother, who is still around, she's 95, and actually she watches my channel when my dad downloads it for her. She is an amazing quilter, and she quilted me a beautiful queen size set of a quilt and 2 pillowcases, and she hand quilted the entire thing. So I have that beautiful heirloom. So my grandmother always says she believes in piecing a quilt by machine, but you must hand quilt it. Now, when it comes to garment sewers, there have been a few patterns lately, or in the last few years, that have come up that have been really, really popular. And one of them is the Tamarack jacket, of course, from Grainline Studios. I think that's probably the most popular one. You're quilting the fabric, and then you're cutting it out, and then you're sewing together. At least I believe that's how it works. Perhaps you know what? I've never made it, so I can't say, but I do know that. I don't know the process, but I do know that that's a quilted jacket. I often see projects too where people have taken quilts that are either damaged or unwanted. So often you find quilts at secondhand shops or Goodwill, and you just know how much work went into it. And so if they can't be used any longer as quilts, I've seen people turn them into the most amazing coats. So I came across the pattern for the wool quilted vest from Purl Soho. Now there are 2 versions of this, both are free. One was done in a double gauze cotton, and the second one was done in wool. They are slightly different designs, so if you're going to go look at this pattern, just know that the cut of them is slightly different, which is why they made them 2 separate patterns. And this is where I ended up. So I'm going to just give you an overview first, and then I'll show you a few close-up photos. So this project uses Lady McElroy, I want to get this right, Lady McElroy pure wool coating in gray, and this was all gifted to me by Minerva in exchange for a blog post. I was going to do a blazer, if you guys remember, and then I just was so uninspired to do a blazer because I realized I never wear blazers. So maybe that's a project for next year. Also, it was starting to get warmer, but it's very chilly in the mornings still here. Even now in May, surprisingly, it's quite cool in the mornings, and so having a little extra layer has been surprisingly useful. I have used this surprising amount the last couple weeks. So this is made from Lady McElroy coating, and then inside I have used the cotton poplin also from Minerva that I used for my pajamas. And if you'll remember those pajamas that I made. And so it was a great use of opening, using the leftovers, and I actually use them again, which you'll see in an upcoming video. It's nice and soft. It provides a nice contrast to the wool on the front. And yeah, so here's the process of what I went through to make this. So first of all, I found batting at my local shop, and my batting was iron-on. And this was really helpful because it meant I didn't have to pin baste, I didn't have to do anything else, and it wasn't super thick, which I also thought was great because obviously this is a transitional item. I don't want it to be really, really warm, but I do want it to have a little heft. So I ironed it on, and you iron it on only the wool, or on your outer fabric, you don't iron it clearly, but you don't quilt through the lining. So as you can see here, there's no quilting on this inside portion. There's only quilting, and I will show it up close now, on the outer portion. So I absolutely could have quilted this on the machine, and that's what the instructions told you. The instructions had you cut out the front pieces and the back, add your batting, baste it together, and then machine quilt it. But my grandmother ringing in my ear, I thought, it's only a vest. That's smaller than a baby quilt. How long can it take me to quilt it? Now, did it take too long, and was it worth it? It took a lot longer than I thought. I think ultimately it took me about 10 hours of quilting. which probably would have been about half an hour of machine quilting. And I'll put in a picture here of some of the steps. So I used the Prim chalk applier to mark my lines, which was integral. If I hadn't done that, it would have been an absolute disaster. So I marked all my lines, and then I used a Gutermann waxed cotton quilting thread, which has some stiffness to it, and that was really helpful as well. I decided to go with the green so that I would have a link to the pattern on the inside, because the fabric on the inside has some green. I wanted a little bit of contrast with the gray, but nothing that would pop out, something that I'd want, you'd want to have to look for and kind of find. So I did that, and then I started the quilting process. So I sat outside for most of the time and did my hand quilting. Honestly, I wouldn't want my grandmother looking too close at this. I used pretty big stitches, especially once I realized how long it was going to take me. But I do feel that the outcome in the end is absolutely worth it, because I'm going to have this forever, and knowing how much extra time and effort I put into it, I don't think it necessarily looks any better, but I think that the time I put into it makes a difference. So in terms of whether I would suggest you hand quilt something, I think it kind of depends on what mood you're in. If you're in a meditative mood where you just want to practice some stitching and you get something out of the process of hand quilting, I would say absolutely go for it. This is a great size project to do it, because ultimately I did it over the course of 3 days, and it wasn't that big of a deal. If you're kind of not really enjoying the process, maybe you decide to go the machine quilting route, and I certainly think there's no shame in that. This is just the way that I decided to go. So you bind this, actually not with bias strips, just with a straight strip along from selvage to selvage. So I bound it all the way around. That was easy. I attached it one side with the machine, and then I did the hand binding. And again, my grandmother insists on hand binding. So I got that from her. So I attached the binding on one side, but then I finished it to the inside by hand. And that was also quite rewarding. I love that this has kind of a lower in the back. I think that's part of the difference between, hopefully this is staying in focus. Put it in front of you here. I think that's part of the difference between the first and second patterns, is that you have this high-low hem. You're also supposed to add snaps. I did not do that. I haven't found I needed a closure on this. I like wearing it open. I might add the snaps eventually, but I didn't really feel the need to. The only problem with this is that because the original pattern is boiled wool and I just used a plain wool, I should have turned the edges of the pockets under before I stitched them down. And I did think at the time it was strange that they didn't have you fold them under, and then it didn't click for me that of course it's boiled wool, so they don't have to worry about it fraying. So these pockets are awesome. They are just a really, really great size. Perfect for like walking out and then just throwing in my keys and my phone, but already it's starting to come away. So I've added some fray check, and I'm going to probably open up this top seam and just fold it down and give it a little bit more strength and resilience. But other than that, it turned out great. So I will put in some photos of me wearing it, and I hope that you like it as well. Like I said, I have one red flannel vest that I used to wear like before I got married. I just remember having a Roots red vest. But other than that, I don't think I've ever worn a vest. And I never really understood the point, because if I get cold in my arms. So the idea of just keeping my trunk warm didn't really make any sense to me. I stand corrected. Now that I have it, there's been a few times where I would have had to wear a jacket if I didn't just have this, and wearing this was absolutely enough. So for the transitional seasons in, here in Spain, and I'm sure at home in Canada as well, this was a great choice. Okay guys, that's all for me today. I'll be back with my Me Made May roundup, as well as a giveaway and a brand new pattern release. So I will see you guys soon. I hope wherever you are, the sun is shining and you are sewing. Bye-bye.